This is Robert Kraft, and I'm your host on SNN.Network. And joining me right now is, we have a couple guests today, actually. We have David Johnson, the chairman and CEO of Enveric Biosciences, publicly traded company. The symbol is ENVB on NASDAQ. And also joining us is Dr. Joseph Tucker, CEO of MagicMed Industries, a private company. And well, firstly, welcome, gentlemen. How are you guys doing?
Great. Good to be here. Thanks, Robert.
Yeah, I echo that, Robert. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you guys both on, because it's funny. For those a little behind the scenes, Dr. Tucker and I, we had a couple false starts with doing our interview where we're like, okay, we'll talk about this. We'll talk about this. We're not sure. But with the recent announcement that Enveric put out, announcing the definitive agreement to acquire MagicMed Industries, we thought, I think we should have both on to talk about this news. So, to start us off, David, can you give us a quick overview of this news and, what this means for Enveric?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, hey, as you can imagine, Robert, we are excited about the announcement, which came out a couple of weeks ago. Joe and I started talking several months ago, and we had seen MagicMed and watched some of the progression for, really since the start of the year as we started trading on NASDAQ. And we just liked what their business model was. We liked what they were doing. And really, the more Joe and I started talking, we recognized that both companies were extremely complementary. They were a world-class discovery and development engine in the world of psychedelics. We are a preclinical, clinical company in the world of cannabinoids. This ability to have an engine which goes from concept through discovery, through development, through preclinical, and through clinical, right to commercialization is a really big idea. And so now, all of a sudden, your ability to take both psychedelic compounds and cannabinoid compounds through that engine becomes a really exciting proposition. So that started us off. And then, listen, this is now about a mind and a body in dealing with indications around both oncology. And interestingly enough, the more Joe and I have spoken about it, as you know, the area of the central nervous system has really been one of the key areas that psychedelics has nurtured. And this ability to make a huge difference in the lives of patients. When you think about what we're doing in the three key initiatives, peripheral neuropathy, generally a central nervous system issue that people are challenged with. We're going into the clinic with glioblastoma, a central nervous system tumor. And in our radiation oncology or radiation-induced dermatitis, this is also being done in a head and neck cancer to start with, which again is a central nervous system tumor. So there's some really interesting points of congregation that are put together. So it just more and more seemed like this made a lot of sense where the two companies together, 1 + 1 equaled a lot more than 2. And as I say, we're real excited about putting this together.
So now I want to throw to Dr. Tucker here, before, because some people might not have heard of MagicMed and what the company is doing. But first, before we get to that, what's your comment on this acquisition, what this means for you and the company?
Well, it's kind of hard to add much beyond what David just said. I think he nailed it there. Really, the coming together, where MagicMed really comes from is sort of a very strong science focus on a discovery engine, creating all these new molecules that we think are needed in the psychedelic space, these better drugs, but we did not have the capability to take that through the clinic. And so our business model prior to meeting Enveric was we're going to need to partner these off with others, which was a little frustrating for us to think about because we knew we were going to be creating these really fantastic drug molecules. We were afraid we were going to be, selling them cheaply, if you will, partnering them off with others. So it was really actually very exciting to meet Enveric and to realize that if you put the two halves, because that's how I feel like we have like two halves of a company, you put it together, and now it's a complete end-to-end business from discovery all the way to commercialization, psychedelics and cannabinoids, mind and body, just the whole thing just resonates, right? So that was the excitement for us for sure.
Absolutely. So, going right back to you, Dr. Tucker, on this, you alluded to it a little bit, but, can you give everybody a quick overview exactly what MagicMed does and some of the problems you're looking to solve?
Sure. Yeah. So MagicMed, we're very focused up till now in the psychedelic medicine space, and that was really, psychedelic medicine for those who don't know is, it's a very big, very contemporary topic right now. The recognition that molecules that have historically been considered to be hallucinogenic agents actually have potentially a very exciting role to play in the treatment of mental health. There's, some great data come out from scientists all around the world supporting that. But the issue is that the molecules that are being used are all old. They're 50 years old or 1,000 years old. They're not new, and they haven't been tailored to have exactly the right activity, the greatest benefit and the least side effect. So MagicMed is very, totally focused on creating those ideal molecules that are much better than the old molecules. And so that you can actually get to the greatest number of patients and have the greatest amount of benefit with the least side effects. So that's what MagicMed has been doing since day one.
Very good. So then now the question thrown to you, David, we're talking about, now adding on more clinical programs. It's amazing. Mind, body, holistically, it makes a lot of sense. But now there's this added clinical programs that you're going to have to add on that to focus on some of the psychedelic effects or to focus on the psychedelics. So, how have you thought about that when you looked at this acquisition and then moving forward with prioritization of clinical programs and being able to juggle all of these? Because it's a lot, right?
No, it's a great question, and we've spent a lot of time on it. Listen, in the end of the day, I think the best way to look at this is in two ways. First of all, we at Enveric have a short-term clinical pipeline that is about to be produced. So I think we've shared with you the last time you and I spoke, we hope glioblastoma will be in the clinic by the end of this year. We hope that radiodermatitis will be in the clinic either very close to the end of this year or early next year, and followed closely behind, call it within the year after that, with chemo-induced peripheral neuropathy. So this short-term pipeline will already be there because psychedelics are a little bit behind, right? So we're still discovering and developing psychedelics. We're talking a little bit longer term. So now it builds us for a short, medium, and long-term pipeline and our ability to manage that fiscally and with human and financial resources. So we really like it, and we think it builds a lot of value. I think the second thing that I always say to people, Robert, it's my Canadian upbringing, I think more shots on goal continue to de-risk this business model. Listen, I think that anybody who's been in the biotechnology space would say, if you have 7 molecules going through your pipeline, starting going into the clinic today, 100% of them are not going to be successful. And if you're dealing with one molecule, there's a black and white success ratio. You either win or you lose. We'll have 7 molecules putting it into the pipeline and be able to look for the highest probability for those to get to the commercialized state. So I think more shots on goal, de-risking the company, and that ability to have a short, medium, and long-term pipeline are pretty exciting for investors.
Very good. Thank you for that answer. That clarifies a lot, even for me. So going back to you, Dr. Tucker, talking about the molecules and those shots on goal, what about MagicMed's psychedelic molecules that you're looking to bring to the clinic? What makes them unique and different compared to your peers out there?
Well, we're certainly a very science-led company, MagicMed, and soon to be part of Enveric. And so, we really believe that the science needs to lead here. In particular, in the psychedelic medicine space, this is a very, very interesting sector right now, where you have 2 big schools of thought out there. One is the hallucination is absolutely required. It's part of the approach. And there's the other school of thought that says, no, that's a side effect. You really don't need it. Take a look, for example, at all the other molecules that are say hitting the same receptors that are having similar positive effects. So it's really interesting that it's an unknown right now. And so, our approach is we're agnostic, right? We're making a very large number of different molecules that are all new. So that's a big differentiator. unlike the majority of the companies out there, everything that we're doing are novel molecules. So these are patent protectable, they're completely new activities compared to the others. And so as long as we let the science lead us and say, from this large portfolio of potential drugs, which ones are better than everything else that's out there, those are the ones we're going to take forward. So I think that's very different for us. So, David mentioned where the psychedelic molecules are a little bit behind the cannabinoid molecules. True, right? But it's because we're letting the results lead, right? We're letting let's find the ones that will be novel, that will be new, that will be patent protectable. Again, unlike the majority of other companies in the space, actually patent protectable, but also work better. Those will be the ones we take forward. So I'm really excited, about both the short-term prospects of Enveric plus MagicMed with the existing cannabinoids, but also the medium and longer-term prospects. Those are potentially some big, exciting drugs and big indications that we're going to be driving towards.
Got it. So come back to you real quick. Have you even thought about some of the indications that you're looking to go after right now? I mean, as you said, look, mind, body, MagicMed, more or less, quote unquote, handling the mind part, right? So, I mean, have you thought about that, or are you going to let the science kind of guide you into what indications you're going to look at?
You need to have a starting point, right? For sure. So I think, one of the things that brought Enveric and MagicMed together, right off the bat, there's a very obvious nexus point between the two entities, and that is cancer-related PTSD, right? The premise for that is already, I think, fairly well established, to the point that up in Canada, the Ministry of Health has actually permitted a number of patients that are suffering from terminal cancer and have PTSD to take psilocybin as a treatment. So the idea of tryptamines, which is the core molecule behind psilocybin, tryptamines for cancer-related PTSD, it's already out there. It's well established. Can we make something better? So that's definitely our first nexus, the first thing we're looking at. But I think beyond that, there's a couple of other really obvious, really large opportunities. Depression is a very big area for psychedelics. There's a lot of very compelling data in depression. And the other one is substance misuse, which is, sometimes people say substance abuse, and that can be, alcohol dependency, it can be smoking, it can be other drugs. Anyway, substance misuse is a very big need in society, where you started again to see some really compelling data that this class of molecules could be a game changer. So those are like the three obvious things for us to get started on.
Very good. David, did you want to add anything to that?
I think Joe's done a great job at walking you through it. And to Joe's point, I think you always need to be starting with a targeted focus, and the PTSD and cancer, that's the targeted focus. From there, you can go into many different directions, but targeting the organization with focus, with the financial resources upfront, I think that creates just a really big opportunity to start with.
Very good. All right, going back to Dr. Tucker, my last question, what's your background? What got you into all of this?
Oh, well, so I'm a scientist originally. Originally, actually, my PhD work was in things having to do with the central nervous system. Then I was on the capital markets side, as a sell side analyst, and I'm reformed from that. That was a little too much to the dark side for me. I've come back a bit to being a company guy. But for the last 20 years, I've been working with scientists. I love work with scientists coming right out of the universities. That's where the cutting edge stuff is coming from. And it's always been, can we learn from nature, actually? Can we learn from, some of my earliest work was, how does the brain repair itself with neural stem cells? But, in the last 10 years, it's been, how do plants like the opium poppy or cannabinoid, cannabis, and now psychedelics, these come from things like psilocybin. These are natural sourced molecules. How did nature make these things, and can we make them better to make an even better drug out of them? That's what I've been doing the last 10 years. And it's just a natural progression to get to psychedelics.
Very good. And my final question for you, David, you alluded to a little bit already when you talk about, some of the clinical programs that you're looking to launch later this year, but giving us the full picture, just like I asked you in our last interview, from what you can tell us, what would you say are some other or the full picture of all the value catalysts that investors can look forward to from Enveric?
No, listen, this is a story now. I think the story holds together exceptionally well. That this is really about execution now. This is about getting GBM into the clinic. This is about getting radiodermatitis into the clinic. This is about getting CIPN into the clinic. This is about getting PTSD into the clinic. And so it's forming the right relationships with the types of clinics that we want to be involved in, progressing the preclinical and clinical, continuing down that pendulum, and taking what this great discovery and development work and good science is to get it into the pipeline. So this is really now about execution. I think the story's great. Now we've got a team in place that can take this to the next level. And as I think you may know, Robert, from the announcement, we've appointed Joe as the Chief Executive Officer of the newly combined company, which, as you can already see in your early discussions with him, we really think his background allows us to take this company to a very different level when we put the two together. So that's the big value inflection points as we move forward.
Very good. And David, one last question, and this is just playing devil's advocate, because look, I've been following cannabis for a long time. Actually, my first job as a junior analyst was researching cannabis back in 2010. So I remember following in 2014, there was the big cannabis boom bust. Psychedelics has really caught fire quite a bit in the last year and change. So what about this quote, I don't want to say boom, but this quote unquote newness of psychedelics, makes it different than what happened when cannabis first came on the scene in 2010, 2014, that time frame?
Yeah, I think there's two things that are really important, and it was for us in our due diligence. First of all, if you speak to the scientific community, and Joe is one of them, they will tell you that the ability to work with psychedelic compounds and bring them to novel molecules is actually much easier than cannabis compounds and molecules. And so number one, I really think the science has an ability to bring more molecules to the market and do better things. That's number one. Number two, listen, opioids in our society have become a massive issue and a massive problem. And here we have an ability with a natural occurring compound to deal with many of the same neuroscience or mental health issues than opioids once did without any side effects. So thing number two, and then thing number three, I think following the science is always the right way to go. You go back and look at the publications that come out of Yale, that come out of Johns Hopkins over these past 5 to 10 years. It's clearly demonstrating that good things are happening in the psychedelic world. And so I think it's a very different mindset and marketplace than back in the wild, wild west days of cannabis. And remember, these aren't for recreation. These are only for medical use. And I think that's a really key differentiation from cannabis versus the psychedelic space.
Very good. I'm gonna have to have Joe back on at some point to talk, because I had no idea that it was actually easier with psychedelics to be able to do some of the things that you're just referring to. So, but I think we'll leave it at that. I think we covered quite a bit in this interview. So, to close us out, Joe, where can we go and find more information about MagicMed? And then David, following that, where we can go and find more information about Enveric. So Joe, you first.
Yeah. So certainly we have a very good website, MagicMedIndustries.com, and we're on all the social media that you might imagine, the Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn, and I think even Reddit, you name it, we're all there right now, until of course we become one entity with Enveric later this year.
Very good. And David?
And as always, Enveric.com will, again, being a public company, you'll see all of our filings, you'll see all of our press releases. In fact, Robert, we had a press release this morning, and I think it just demonstrates how between Joe and I over the next 17 days, I believe we're speaking at 5 different conferences and really trying to start to educate the investor public about who is Enveric, we're still quite new, who is MagicMed, they're a private company, and the excitement of putting 1 + 1 to make a lot more than 2 together. So Enveric.com, you'll see all of that.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you both so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed listening to both of you today and learning more about not just both your companies, but the proposed acquisition going forward. So again, both of you stay safe, good luck, and I look forward to our next update.
Awesome. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.